last week turned my entire world upside down, and even now as I sit here, I'm trying to piece it all together. I never imagined my life could unravel this way. My wife, Olivia, and I had been married for just over a year. To the outside world, we were the perfect couple, the kind that made people say, "You're so lucky to have each other." We smiled in pictures, held hands in public, and radiated that textbook version of happiness. But if everything were as picture-perfect as it seemed, I wouldn't be here telling this story. It all began in October. Olivia had just been promoted at her job, a huge milestone for her. I remember how ecstatic she was, the way her eyes lit up when she got the call. And I was her biggest cheerleader, grinning ear to ear, telling her she deserved every bit of it. The pay raise wasn't bad either, an added bonus to her well-earned success. But as with most things in life, the promotion came with strings attached. Olivia's new role required her to transfer to a different office, much farther from home, in a new environment filled with unfamiliar co-workers. At the time, I told myself this was good, an exciting opportunity for her to grow, meet new people, and thrive. I had no idea how quickly everything would change, how the ground beneath me would shift before I even realized it. Her promotion came at the worst possible time for me. As a software developer, the end of the year is chaos, deadlines piling up, projects demanding my undivided attention. I buried myself in work thinking, this is just a phase, we'll get through it together. But Olivia, she seemed to dive headfirst into her new work life, making friends with her new colleagues faster than I'd expected. She became particularly close with a small group of women at the office, always out with them after work. They were constantly grabbing drinks, celebrating something or other, or just decompressing after a long day. At first, I didn't think much of it. I encouraged her, wanting to be the kind of husband who supports his wife unconditionally. After all, she was in a new place, and making connections was a good thing, right? But then the late nights began. It wasn't just the occasional drink or dinner anymore. Olivia started coming home later and later. Her evenings stretched into the night, and with every passing week, I felt that unease growing in my chest. The first real red flag hit me one chilly evening in November. She hadn't come home at her usual time, and I tried calling her. Once, twice, 3 times. Texts? No response. Hours passed, and my mind spiraled into a storm of worst-case scenarios. Was she hurt? Had something happened? When she finally walked through the door, it was close to midnight. Her cheeks were flushed, and there was something off about her, like she wasn't entirely herself. "Where were you?" I asked, keeping my voice as steady as I could, though my stomach was twisting into knots. "Oh, Mark, I'm so sorry," she said, her words slightly slurred, her tone unusually carefree. "We were at Lisa's place for her birthday. I completely lost track of time." She brushed past me, her perfume lingering in the air, a scent that wasn't hers. Something was wrong. I felt it deep in my gut, but I ignored it, telling myself I was overthinking. But deep down I knew this was only the beginning. Her excuse made sense, on the surface at least. But something about the way she avoided my gaze and silenced her buzzing phone set me on edge. I wanted to believe her, I really did. But deep down, a nagging feeling told me otherwise. That night planted a seed of doubt in my mind, and as much as I tried to ignore it, the days ahead would only water it until it grew into something impossible to overlook. What started as an occasional late night soon became the norm. Week after week, Olivia came home later and later, always armed with an explanation. A team dinner, drinks with coworkers, someone's impromptu celebration. On the surface, it all sounded reasonable, but the sheer frequency of it left me questioning everything. At first, I tried to rationalize it. She's just adjusting to a new job. It's a phase. It'll pass. But every time she walked through that door hours later than expected, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. One night, I couldn't keep it bottled up any longer. When she finally came home, I was waiting for her. I had to know. "Olivia," I said, keeping my voice steady, despite the frustration boiling inside me, "we need to talk." She hesitated, lingering near the doorway, as if she was deciding whether to step further in or turn around and leave. "This can't keep happening," I continued. "You're out all the time, coming home late. And half the time I don't even know where you are. I just need to understand what's going on." Her shoulders tensed, and she let out an exasperated sigh. "Mark, I don't know what you want me to say. Ay, Madriki! I'm not a child. I don't need to give you a play-by-play of my every move." Her dismissive tone only fueled the fire inside me. "This isn't about controlling you," I said, my voice firm but calm. "It's about basic respect. We're married, Olivia. I'm not asking for much. Just a simple heads up when you're running late or where you'll be." She crossed her arms, her gaze hardening. "If you trusted me, Mark, we wouldn't even be having this conversation." Her words hit like a punch to the gut, but I refused to back down. "It's not about trust," I shot back. "It's about how your choices are affecting me, affecting us. I feel like I'm being pushed to the sidelines, like your friends and your nights out are more important than our marriage." She scoffed, shaking her head as if I was being ridiculous. The conversation spiraled from there, both of us throwing words at each other like knives, trying to make the other understand. After nearly an hour of back and forth, she finally agreed to cut back on her late nights. But even then, I could feel it. The damage was done. For a while, she kept her word. She came home earlier, spent more evenings at home, and the tension seemed to ease. But something was different. Her smiles felt forced, her words clipped, and the warmth that used to fill the room when she was around had faded into something colder. Then came the day that should have been a turning point. My promotion. It was the culmination of months of hard work, but more than that, it was a chance to make things right. I'd been tied up with deadlines and late nights at the office for so long, and now I finally had room to breathe, to focus on my marriage. I was hopeful, maybe even a little excited, thinking this could be the fresh start we needed. That afternoon I left work early, eager to share the news with Olivia. I'd planned everything. Dinner at her favorite restaurant, a quiet celebration for just the two of us. I wanted to surprise her, to remind her of what we had and how much it mattered to me. But as I stepped into the house, that sense of hope shattered in an instant. From the kitchen I heard her voice. "I'm not sure if he suspects anything. He's been so caught up in his work that I don't think he's noticed, but we can't take any chances." Her words stopped me in my tracks. My breath hitched and my chest tightened as a wave of nausea rolled over me. I froze where I stood, my thoughts spiraling. Who is she talking to? What hasn't she wanted me to see? I couldn't stop myself. I stepped into the kitchen without thinking. When Olivia turned and saw me, her face drained of color, and her expression turned stiff like someone caught mid-lie. "Who were you talking to?" I asked, keeping my voice calm even though my pulse was hammering in my ears. She let out a laugh that sounded unnatural, brittle. "Mark, you're overthinking. It's just a coworker," she said quickly. "We're planning a surprise for a friend's birthday." Her explanation could have been convincing, but the way she fidgeted, her fingers toying with the edge of the counter, her phone still clutched in her hand, gave me pause. "Then why did you sound so secretive?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. She let out a heavy sigh, shaking her head as though I was the one being unreasonable. "Because it's a surprise, Mark," she snapped. "You're reading way too much into this." For a moment, I felt like I'd gone too far, doubting her over something so trivial. Maybe I was overreacting. "Sorry," I said, trying to smooth things over. "I guess I misread the situation." She offered me a small smile, but it felt strained, like she was forcing it. "It's fine," she replied flatly. "Let's just move on, okay?" I nodded, but that hollow feeling in my chest lingered long after the conversation ended. In the days and weeks that followed, things didn't get better. If anything, they got worse. Olivia was glued to her phone at all hours, her attention slipping further and further away from me. She'd chuckle at texts late at night, completely engrossed in conversations I wasn't part of. It was like she was in another world, one where I didn't exist. When her office announced a pre-Christmas party, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. "It's a big deal, Mark," she said, brushing off my unease. "Everyone important will be there. I'll come home early, I promise." I wanted to believe her, so I agreed, but that nagging feeling stayed with me, like a shadow I couldn't escape. On the evening of the party, I drove her to the event, a sprawling country house lit up with twinkling lights. As we pulled up the long driveway, my phone buzzed with a call from a friend congratulating me on my recent promotion. I stayed in the car, answering the call and chatting briefly while Olivia walked toward the house. My eyes followed her, but then something caught my attention. A man waiting at the door. He greeted her with an easy smile, and then he placed his hand on the small of her back, guiding her inside like it was second nature. My jaw clenched at the sight. "You're imagining things," I told myself. "There's nothing going on here." But the unease in my chest only grew heavier. Later that evening, when I got home, my eyes landed on Olivia's laptop, sitting on the desk. The thought hit me like a flash. If there was ever a chance to find answers, it was now. But as always, fate had other plans. The next evening, on my way home from work, I found myself stuck in gridlock. A major accident had completely choked the highway, and by the time I finally made it through the front door, I felt like I'd been hit by a truck myself. The exhaustion was overwhelming. The idea of snooping through Olivia's laptop crossed my mind again, but the thought of exerting any effort felt impossible. I collapsed onto the couch, convincing myself I could deal with everything tomorrow. For now, I just wanted peace. That peace shattered with a sudden knock at the door. I opened it to find Olivia's sister Brooke standing there. She looked pale, her eyes darting nervously, like she wasn't sure if she should even be there. "Brooke, what are you doing here?" I asked, thrown off by the unexpected visit. Her voice trembled. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside without hesitation, watching as she paced the living room, wringing her hands. The tension was unbearable, so I finally broke the silence. "What's going on? Is everything okay?" Brooke stopped pacing and turned to face me, tears glistening in her eyes. "Mark," she said softly, her voice shaking. "I didn't know how to say this, but I can't keep it to myself anymore." She paused, taking a deep breath. "Olivia is cheating on you." Her words hit me like a freighter train, leaving me rooted in place as the air was sucked out of the room. I stared at her, unable to process the weight of what she just said. Brooke, Olivia's own sister, stood in front of me, confirming the one thing I had been too afraid to confront. In that moment, the house no longer felt like home. It was as if everything I thought I knew had been yanked out from under me. I had trusted Olivia completely, blind to the double life she was living, right under my nose. What made it worse was that Brooke worked at the same company. If anyone would know, it was her, and there was no way I could dismiss what she was telling me. Brooke went on, explaining how things started changing when Olivia moved to the new office. The friends she had gotten close to weren't exactly the best influences. According to Brooke, they lived recklessly. One of them was even in an open marriage. Olivia didn't stand a chance with people like that around her, Brooke said, her voice tinged with regret. She then detailed how Olivia seemed to gravitate toward one male coworker in particular. "That's him," I muttered, my jaw clenching as I remembered the voice I'd overheard on the phone weeks ago. Brooke looked down, clearly uncomfortable. She hesitated, but I gave her a slight nod to continue. "I didn't want to jump to conclusions," she said slowly. "But at the company party," her voice trailed off before she exhaled shakily and met my eyes. "Mark, they weren't even trying to hide it. They were glued to each other, laughing, whispering, and—" She paused, visibly uncomfortable, but pushed forward. "I saw them kiss. Later, they disappeared into one of the bedrooms." Her words pierced through me like daggers. I felt my fists clench involuntarily as the betrayal sank in. The woman I had given everything to, the one I trusted above all else, had shattered our vows without a second thought. Despite the storm raging inside me, I managed to thank Brooke for telling me. Her honesty didn't soften the blow, but at least I wasn't in the dark anymore. Once she left, I didn't waste any time. I turned to Olivia's laptop, still sitting on the desk where she had left it. If there were any doubts left to settle, the answers would be there. It didn't take long to find them. A string of messages unraveled before my eyes, exposing everything I had been too blind, or too trusting, to see. Text after text between Olivia and her friends painted a horrifying picture. Jokes about how clueless I was, flirtatious exchanges with her co-worker, and plans laid out in detail for how they'd sneak around. They spoke in riddles and inside jokes, mocking me as though I was some naive fool for trusting her. It wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation. Each word I read tore through me like a blade. It was undeniable, revolting, and enough to leave me shaking with rage. My hands trembled as I slammed the laptop shut, the sound echoing through the silent room. A storm of emotions swirled inside me: pain, fury, disgust. But beneath all of that, another thought emerged from the depths of my memory, one I hadn't let myself think about for years. Before Olivia and I had gotten serious, there had been something with Brooke. It was fleeting, two young people testing the waters, but it was real. We had a connection, a spark. But just as it started to feel like it might become something more, Olivia had swooped in, as if she couldn't stand the idea of not getting her way. She had a knack for that, making sure she always came out on top. Until now, I had never questioned the choice I made, but sitting there, betrayed and furious, I couldn't help but wonder if I had chosen wrong all along. Brooke sat quietly on the couch, her hands fidgeting in her lap, clearly uncomfortable with the weight of the night. I stood abruptly, grabbed a bottle of whiskey I kept hidden for particularly rough days, and poured us each a glass. "To clarity," I muttered, raising my glass with a bitter smile. Brooke hesitated for a moment before lifting hers. "To honesty," she replied softly. We sat together, the hours stretching long into the night. I vented, pouring out everything I had been holding inside. The times I had ignored the red flags, the moments I had bent over backward trying to salvage a marriage that was already crumbling. Brooke listened without judgment, her quiet nods and occasional words of understanding offering the kind of support I hadn't realized I needed. She admitted something that hit me like a punch to the gut. She had always seen Olivia as selfish and manipulative, but she never said anything because she didn't feel it was her place. As the whiskey flowed, so did the words, and the pain we had both been holding on to began to take on a new shape. The anger, the resentment, the years of hurt, it all found an outlet. Before I knew what was happening, one thing led to another, and Brooke and I ended up in bed together. The next morning, I was jolted awake by a sharp scream that shattered the stillness. "What the hell is going on here?" Olivia's voice trembled with fury as she stood in the doorway, her face contorted with disbelief. Groggy but unflinching, I sat up in bed and met her gaze head-on. "Exactly what it looks like, Olivia." Her eyes darted between me and Brooke, who was frantically pulling the sheet up to cover herself, her face flushed with shame. Olivia's expression twisted into something I could only describe as betrayal mixed with heartbreak. "How could you?" she spat, her voice cracking. "With my sister?" Tears spilled down her cheeks as she glared at me, but I refused to back down. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stood, squaring my shoulders as I faced her. "Don't you dare play the victim," I said coldly. My voice was steady, but the anger simmering beneath was undeniable. "I know all about you and your coworker. You've been cheating on me for months, maybe longer, so don't stand there and act outraged." Her fiery anger faltered, giving way to something else entirely. Panic. "Mark, I can explain," she stammered, her voice cracking. "It wasn't serious. It didn't mean anything." "Save it," I snapped, cutting her off. "I've seen the texts. I know about the party. You made your choices, Olivia. Now I'm making mine." Her knees buckled, and she collapsed into the chair behind her, sobs spilling out as her hands covered her face. And just like that, the thread that once tied us together snapped. Whatever bond we had, whatever love had held us close, was gone. "Mark, please," she choked out between tears. Her voice wavered, heavy with desperation. "We can fix this. I'll quit my job. We can do counseling, whatever you want. Just don't throw it all away." I stayed firm, my voice cold and detached. "You threw it away, Olivia. The moment you betrayed me, it was over. There's no fixing this." Her tear-streaked face twisted into anger as her eyes darted toward Brooke. The panic quickly morphed into fury. "And you," she spat, pointing a trembling finger. "You're my sister. How could you do this to me?" Brooke didn't flinch. She sat upright, her gaze steady and unyielding as she stared Olivia down. "How could you do this to Mark?" Brooke fired back, her voice sharp and unwavering. "You treated him like he didn't mark her, like your marriage didn't mark her, and now you're mad at me for telling the truth. You're the one who ruined this, not me." Olivia's face darkened, but she had no comeback. Without another word, she stormed out of the house, slamming the door so hard the walls seemed to shake. That night, I made a decision I had been avoiding for too long. I packed my bags. It wasn't out of anger or revenge, it was something deeper, a calm but resolute understanding that I couldn't stay in that house anymore. The memories, the lies, the betrayal, it all clung to the walls like a suffocating fog. That wasn't my home anymore. I moved into a modest apartment downtown. It wasn't much, but it gave me the space I desperately needed to think and start piecing my life back together. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. A few days later, I called Olivia. I needed her to hear it from me directly. "I'm filing for divorce," I said, flatly. Her response was immediate, and it caught me off guard. "Mark, no, please," she begged, her voice cracking. "Don't do this. We can fix this. It's not too late." I almost laughed at the absurdity of her words. "Fix this?" I echoed, my voice cutting through her pleas like ice. "You didn't just hurt me, Olivia. You destroyed our marriage. You cheated on me." "It wasn't like that," she insisted, her tone frantic. "It was a mistake, a stupid, fleeting mistake. It didn't mean anything. I love you, Mark. I just needed to blow off some steam." Her words were like poison. A mistake? Fleeting? She wasn't just downplaying what she'd done, she was trying to erase it, pretending as though her deliberate choices hadn't completely torn my world apart. I wasn't going to argue with her over the phone. "We'll talk," I said curtly, agreeing to meet her in person, not because I was interested in salvaging anything, but because there were practicalities that needed to be handled. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop we used to frequent when we first started dating. As I sat there waiting for her, the irony wasn't lost on me. The place where we had once built memories was now where we would unravel them. At first, the conversation stayed polite, even civil. We started by discussing the practicalities, splitting assets, filing the paperwork, and figuring out how to move forward without unnecessary drama. For a moment, I thought we might actually handle this like adults, but I underestimated Olivia. Out of nowhere, she leaned forward, a strange gleam in her eye. "Mark, have you ever thought about how much relationships are changing these days?" she began, her tone unsettlingly casual. I frowned, caught off guard. "What are you talking about?" "Monogamy," she said, her voice gaining momentum. "It's outdated. Open relationships are so common now. They let people explore without giving up their commitment. Maybe we've been looking at this the wrong way." I stared at her, trying to wrap my head around what she was saying. "Are you seriously suggesting we salvage our marriage by pretending none of this ever happened and calling it progressive?" "Yes," she said eagerly, her eyes lighting up as if she'd found the solution to all our problems. "We could start fresh. No more secrets, no more lies. We'd set boundaries, make it work for us." I couldn't listen to another word. I pushed my chair back and stood, cutting her off mid-sentence. "This conversation is over, Olivia," I said coldly. "You're just trying to justify betrayal by dressing it up as something modern. I'm not interested." Her face darkened as I walked away, but before I reached the door, I heard her mutter under her breath, "You'll regret this." From that moment on, her desperation turned to venom. The divorce, which could have been straightforward, became a drawn-out battle. She fought me on everything: property division, finances, even stooping so low as to bring up my one-night lapse with Brooke to try and gain leverage. But I wasn't about to let her rewrite the story. I stayed calm, let my lawyer handle the mudslinging, and presented the undeniable evidence of her infidelity. No marker. How hard she tried to twist the narrative, the truth was on my side. The legal proceedings dragged on for months, each hearing a draining ordeal. But eventually it was done. The divorce was finalized, and I walked out of that courtroom feeling like I could finally breathe again. We split our assets evenly. And just like that, the life I had built with Olivia was reduced to signatures and spreadsheets. It was surreal how quickly something that once felt permanent could unravel. But as strange as it felt, the relief that followed was undeniable. Through it all, Brooke stayed by my side. Her steady presence became a lifeline, reminding me of the man I used to be, the man I thought I'd lost after years of Olivia's manipulation and betrayal. At first, our time together was simple. We'd grab lunch or go for walks talking about anything and everything. It was innocent, almost therapeutic, but as the days turned into weeks, something deeper began to stir. That connection we'd once had, the one we'd both ignored for so long, started to bloom again. It was quiet and slow, but it felt real. Eventually, we made the decision to move in together. It wasn't impulsive or rushed, it just felt right. Like we were finally getting the chance we'd been denied all those years ago. Of course, Olivia didn't take the news well. When she found out, my phone exploded with a barrage of angry texts, filled with accusations of betrayal and hypocrisy. The irony wasn't lost on me. I didn't bother responding. Olivia's words no longer had any power over me. Living with Brooke brought me a peace I hadn't felt in years. There was no tension, no fear of hidden lies. We were cautious, both still healing from the wreckage Olivia had left behind, but there was an unspoken understanding between us. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel like I was walking on eggshells. I didn't have to pretend or hide who I was. And with that came something I hadn't felt in years. Hope, fragile and cautious, but hope all the same. It was a start.